And I know people say that, right? You just got to take action. You just got to take action. But truly, something clicks, something unlocks in your brain when you take that step and actually do something instead of just read about it.
This is the Passive 25K podcast, a podcast built around the vision of creating wealth through passive income for ourselves and others. The idea of creating income while you sleep seems like a dream come true, but for most professionals, turning this into a reality is a different story. On this show, you will hear real people breaking passive income streams down to the basics, giving you the next steps to start your own passive income journey. If you're new to the show, my name is Kyle Reedstrom from Fargo, North Dakota, where I get to work with my team of agents and investors each day to complete our goal of $25,000 a month in passive income. Now, let's get right into our next conversation. This is the Passive 25K podcast with Kyle Reedstrom, home of Passive Income University. And if you're interested in starting your passive income journey, this is our community of like minds, so definitely check it out. Also home of cash flow coaching. But what we're excited about today is episode 26 with Mike Higgins. We're calling Leveraging a Real Estate License to Create Passive Income. Mike, I'm super excited to have this conversation with you, man.
Man, I'm pumped to be here. I get to see you in Front Row Dad world, and now I get to see you in real estate world. It'll be a good time.
Yes, Mike, this is funny because we have found each other in the world of Front Row Dads, which is an amazing community of dads that are trying to be family men with businesses instead of the opposite. And I found Mike Higgins, and he's a guy that got into real estate in 2015 like I did. And he's a guy with a real estate license and in that world and an investor, and he's a dad, and he likes to play basketball, all these things that we like to do, Mike. And so it's kind of been like we're brothers from another mother. But it's been fun to get to know you, and I'm super excited to hear more about your business and your take on this whole idea of leveraging a real estate license to create your future, man, because that's what you're doing. That's exactly where the path you're going down.
Yeah, man, we've basically been living the same life for the last 8 years in different parts of the country, not knowing each other. And now we know each other, so we can bring those two worlds together. That's
right, man, and you're not too far. Mike's from Wisconsin, so he's a northern cold weather guy. He is a Packers fan, so we're Vikings fans on this side of the country. So
that's okay. That's the closest thing for you. So I get it.
Yes. And I mean, we don't have much to stand on. I mean, other than we got the NFC North this year, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole. All right. But I do want to give a little bio, and Mike, I want you to introduce yourself to the audience a little bit too. Mike Higgins is a recovering realtor turned investor, which I liked. He has been in the real estate industry since 2015, like I said, pivoted his focus towards his fix and flip company while pursuing storage facilities and mobile home parks to buy and hold. He's a proud front row dad with 4 kids and married to his wife, April, for 11 years in the great state of Wisconsin. Mike, give us a little feel of what you've got going on right now in your business and in your world in 2023, maybe some goals and things.
Yeah, man. So that pretty much gives a good rundown. Since 2015, I've been in the real estate world, started off as an agent, and now pre-COVID, basically, mostly completely pivoted the business model to direct to seller single family homes. So I have a business partner. For those that are watching on YouTube, you can see here Blue Badger Home Buyers in the background. That's our company. So we go direct to seller to buy single family properties. And basically we either wholesale them, fix and flip them, or in the past we were keeping them. Now with interest rates where they are right now in 2023, it's really difficult to make a single family property cash flow unless you get it for basically making the seller pay me to take it. So have yet to get a property for $0 or negative. So I haven't gotten there yet. But so what that looks like now for us is we're still going direct to seller. We're still doing the wholesaling. We're still doing the fix and flipping. But basically that is a cash generator for the here and now for us to take those profits. And we're going to be putting those into storage facilities and mobile home parks as kind of the commercial asset class that we've identified that we want to build moving into throughout 2023 and beyond. So we haven't done any of that yet, but that's kind of the business plan pivot that we're looking for. And then also I do have my general contractor's license. and run our subs that we do on our fix and flips. So kind of a vertically integrated business avenue there with the contracting as well.
Nice. And I love that you've made a pivot knowing with the different real estate climate, the market climate, right? Because you definitely have taken on these single families and different projects as buy and holds and just kind of built your portfolio that way. But now you're kind of using that cash to pour into different asset classes. That's what I'm understanding.
Yeah, for sure. Like for us right now, it just doesn't make sense to keep a residential single family home unless it's a short-term rental. You and I have talked offline about short-term rentals. You actually helped me a ton with the one that we just launched a couple months ago, just getting it going and everything. As a short-term rental, that makes sense to me as a single family asset class because the return is much more significant than what if it was just a regular long-term rental, right?
Yeah.
But $200 a door, $150 a door, it takes a lot of doors to get to $25K a month in passive income, right? So
Yep.
we've just identified the fact that, and honestly, a lot of it, Kyle, is just because of the network that you and I have. It's a heavy network of people that are in storage facilities and mobile home parks as an asset class.
That makes sense.
I think you have to leverage the network in the world that you're in that makes sense for you, right? So I know a lot of people in the Airbnb space. I know a lot of people that are in the storage and the mobile home park space. So by default, it feels like a natural pivot for us to get into moving forward. And buying a storage facility that has 100 units versus buying 100 single family doors seems a lot easier to just buy one facility than 100 houses.
Man. And I think that's such a good nugget that you just dropped there, Mike, which is taking inventory of your network and playing into that home field advantage. You know what I mean? Like that's what you're doing. You're listening to the people around you and you're saying, hey, I've got this little engine over here that I'm creating. We're doing business. But where should we put it? Where should we invest it? And you can, there's one thing setting a vision and going that route and staying on it and committing to it, but also pivoting towards what your audience is providing. Where's the fruit growing? Go to that. I think that's awesome. And I had a note down to ask you about your Airbnb. You would just jump into that space with your first one. How's that going so far, man? I'd love to hear because explain your market a little bit and why you guys decided that Airbnb could be a possibility. Because I think this is interesting. Most people are always thinking Airbnb, vacation rentals, beaches, mountains, but you've got one in your neck of the woods. We've got them in Fargo, Moorhead in North Dakota here. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, man. I mean, obviously props to you and big shout out for the help and getting started with some of the software stuff and just all the little details that you wouldn't think about, that a person like me wouldn't think about when setting up a rental. So super appreciative. But if anybody that's listening looks up Appleton, Wisconsin, that's the market that this is in. Nothing really happening in Appleton, Wisconsin. But we're 25 minutes away from the Green Bay Packers, which is obviously a pretty big draw. When a Packer game happens, I mean, Lambeau Field is one of the bucket list NFL stadiums that everybody wants to get to, right? So if your team's playing at Lambeau, you're going to want to fly into Green Bay to come here, right? So, but there's a lot of places people stay up to 45 minutes away. Number one, just because of availability. Number two is the closer you get to Lambeau, the more expensive things get, right, to stay. And that same goes for Airbnb. So a few things that we identified with this one is number one, we were fix and flipping it. We're planning to sell it on the market. And what we found out is the whole reason it turned into an Airbnb, again, having to make a pivot, right? So we had an exit strategy to fix and flip, but after we got more details of something, we had to pivot again. So you'll find that I'm really good at not staying focused on one thing. I'm good at pivoting. Maybe that's the basketball player in me. So we were fix and flipping it, put it on the market, had an accepted offer. And during the home inspection, so this is the time, think late summer, interest rates are starting to rise. Home inspections started to become a thing again, right? So there's a long time in our markets, but for you and I, being a realtor and being in this market where home inspections were not even on the table. Sometimes appraisals weren't even on the table. However, home inspection found that one of the basement walls had what the inspector would call as deflection in it at about 2 inches. So basically, if you're looking down the wall, it kind of bowed in 2 inches. And now the house is 25 years old, and 2 inches is right on the cusp of where they start to think about doing some work to it to bring it back so there's no deflection, right? So as a first-time home buyer, that person was scared, rightfully so. I totally get it. But as somebody who knows that deflection could have happened 23 years ago, could have happened last year, 2 inches for me, it's not the end of the world. Like, I know that it's still structurally sound. The rest of the house is there and it's not going to fall out. It's not going to fall over. As a rental property, that deflection doesn't really matter to me, right?
Yeah.
But as a single family regular residential rental, it wouldn't have cash flowed great. It would have been that exact like $150 to $200 a door. So we're less than a mile from an airport. We're less than a mile from a downtown. We're 25 minutes from the Packer Stadium, and we're 25 minutes from the largest aviation air show in the world every summer. So nothing that you would be like, oh, I got to get an Airbnb around the biggest aviation show ever. Nobody was ever like you said, they're thinking of mountains, they're thinking of beaches,
Yes.
they're thinking of stadiums. So we just had to think quick on our feet and think like, could this be a rental? And you and I were golfing actually. And I was like, hey man, like, what do you think about this thing? And you're like, dude, it sounds like a deal all day. So we ran an air DNA on it and figured out that it looks pretty promising. And so that, I mean, I think we put it live a month and a half ago, about a month and a half ago, and bookings are literally like they're pouring in.
Dude.
We've plugged in some software, different things, and that's got our daily rates to match like when the Packer games are, it goes up on certain days and down on certain days. And without that stuff, I mean, we had a 4-day booking for $1,800 that if we would have had our regular daily rate, it would have been 4 days at $700, right? So
dude, that's huge, Mike. That's amazing, man.
And then we just rented it out for March and April and part of May for $2,500 a month to a guy who he's in transition and just needed a short-term rental that was furnished. So it's going well right now.
Wow.
That's a long story, but I wanted to paint the whole picture for you.
No, man, I think that's so interesting because you see these markets like Appleton. No one's saying, hey, I think I'm going to invest in Appleton, Wisconsin. But like you see an example like this, you even got a midterm rental out of it, that $2,500 for that 2.5 month period, man. And there's so many ways to win in real estate. If you, like I always like to say, if you put your real estate hat on and you put your investor hat on. Because sometimes we have to put our, gather our documents for the banker or analysis hat on. But then sometimes you just have to strap up your boots and be a real estate investor and pivot like you did and say, hey, how do we make this happen? We have this thing sold, but now it didn't work out. What are we going to do? And man, it could be one of the best decisions you've ever made where your debt's going down on that thing, appreciation's going up, you've got cash flow set aside. I love it, Mike. That's cool, man. And thank you for sharing some of the stats too. We're always curious about that.
Yeah. And I think it's important too that you have multiple options when you go into a property, right? So I think that it's a lot of people, I've been really hard on myself in the past of, you got to be focused on one thing. You got to be a fix and flipper. You got to do that really well. You have to be a wholesaler. You have to be a realtor, whatever. Just become a specialist and be very good at that one thing. And that works for a lot of people. But I think it's also my one thing is not having one thing, if that makes sense. So I think it's really important to have multiple exit strategies up front and be confident in that. Again, going around to your network of who you're in, right? It would have been a lot tougher decision had I not had you in my life. Right. Having you in my life was like, oh, this guy does Airbnbs. He says it's pretty much a really good deal. I trust him with everything. So it's probably going to be a pretty good deal. So having multiple exit strategies on the front end, but then also not being afraid to leverage the network that you have. I think that made all the difference in the world with this property specifically.
Yes. Yeah. And a huge testament to single family homes as a class because they have so many different ways you can go. And I always encourage early real estate investors to consider single family homes. I know it's not the most scalable thing in the world, but man, to get your feet wet and be able to pivot on a long-term rental, short-term rental, the midterm rental is a real thing. Getting people for 3, 4, or 5 months, and then just being able to exit with a sale to a primary resident. I mean, there's so many ways. And I promise to our audience that's listening right now, there's tons of value that came before this, but the reason we're here talking is because the question continues to come across my plate, in our community, in our office, of people that are curious about the stuff we're talking about. Mike and I, investing, real estate investing, creating passive income, starting to create goals around other income streams in order to create more freedom in your life. And if it's real estate, if that's a vehicle, a lot of people are asking the question, should I get my real estate license? I hear it all the time, Mike. I don't know if you're hearing this, but the question that I have written down that I really want to discuss today, and I want to peel this back with the rest of our time, most of the rest of our time, is why get a real estate license or why not get a real estate license? And I like to get right to it in the sense of, hey man, I really am curious about your take on this, because we're both sitting here as people that decided to get our real estate license. And I just think there's such interesting perspective we can provide. So I want to hear from you first, Mike.
Yeah, man. So 2015, I originally got my real estate license because my dad is a contractor and a home builder. So I grew up, I was 12 years old. My first job with him was a summer job, roofing houses. And I was the young kid that was on the ground picking up all the shingles that got ripped off the roof before the new roof went on. So I've been around houses my entire life. And I kind of realized, I was like, I know I want to get into this game of doing something with houses. I just read Rich Dad Poor Dad, like a lot of people have. And I thought the best way for me to identify if a deal is a deal and understand a market is, why not get my real estate license and then work in the market that I live in? So then when deals come across my plate, I'll be able to know if a deal's a deal. I'll be able to, maybe I'll work as a realtor for a little bit, right? So the license made sense for me. I also, at that time, I worked, and I feel like I had the perfect setup for it. Like, it's not going to work for everybody. So the short answer to your question is yes and no, both.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to get it, and I think it's bad to get it. It depends who you are. I was in the perfect situation where I had an outside sales job that I didn't have to clock into an office every day. And I could take phone calls. I could check emails on my phone, no matter where I was, and still be productive in my work. And my goals at that time were to not be working all the time at a 9 to 5. I eventually wanted to be in real estate in some capacity as my quote unquote profession. Right. So I do think that depending on what your goals are, it can make sense for you to get your license, because you're going to have access to things that not everybody has access to. Honestly, like having access to the MLS, having access to some of the different features. There's a portal that I use right now that we kind of do a very, like I would say, a quick comp on all the properties that come across our plate with Blue Badger. There's just certain things that you have access to when you have your license that you just can't get when you don't have your license. Now, and the caveat to that is, having your license opens you up to a lot more liability. Right? You have a fiduciary responsibility, which is just a fancy way of saying you have a responsibility to put more money in the pockets of your clients than the pockets of yourself. So there is times where I think that I'll have days that I often think, man, I wish I didn't have my license. If I didn't have my license, it would be a lot easier. I wouldn't have to disclose this, or I wouldn't have to worry about that. I could just approach this as an investor and not, there's a lot of pros and cons to it. But there's pros and cons to everything, right? Like with the brokerages that you and I are at, there's a huge benefit to us having our license and being able to share trainings and recruiting other agents to our company. And that wouldn't happen if we didn't have license as well, which is part of your P25, right? I mean, that's a part of that passive income. So the short answer is yes, I think it's beneficial, and I think it can get in the way at the same time.
And I think it's why this debate is so, there's not a right answer. The answer is yes to everything. And that's the problem with it, and that's because you kind of put your feet into circles, which is kind of what you alluded to, man. Because some days you want to play all out as Mike, the real estate investor. And I'm the same way, man. And then other days it makes sense for you to lean in, to work with clients, to continue to create cash flow that way. When someone's making this decision, Mike, if they're trying to create clarity in the right situation for themselves, like what advice would you give them in the sense of, hey, is this a good idea for me specifically? Obviously, every situation is different, but what could you say to that person that's kind of sitting on the fence right now?
It's a great question. I think it depends on your long-term goals and in what capacity you're going to be in the real estate investing world, right? So like if you're a fix and flipper, I think you could make a really good case that getting your license would be a smart idea because you could save yourself a lot of money with properties that you're going to sell.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a long-term buy and hold investor, I mean, I think you'd be just as fine having a trusted agent that can find you deals. The reality of the situation is you're probably not going to find many fix and flip deals and or long-term rental holds on the market, right? The deals are trading between people that are off market, guys like me, guys like you that go direct to seller and get a deal, under contract or from a wholesaler or something like that. Unless you're swimming in cash like Scrooge McDuck and have tons of money to throw at something, and you just literally need a placeholder for your cash into a real estate property, you're probably not going to buy it off the MLS. Now, obviously that's not an absolute. There are deals that are bought and sold on the MLS every single day, but by and large, the best deals are not going to be found on the MLS. So I think in short, fix and flipper makes a ton of sense to me, right? Because I can list my own properties. I don't have to pay myself a commission. I can bury it into the profits, or I can, not take as big of a fix and flip profit and pay myself 10% commission that shows earned income instead of profit income from the fix. In that capacity, I think it makes sense. But if you're buying long-term rentals, I don't know a situation that you would actually need it, because there's a lot of tools out there that, even though the MLS does provide a lot of opportunity for agents, a lot of tools, there's a lot of tools out there that are kind of third party that can get you really close to and evaluating any deal.
Yeah. And there's such an interesting dynamic to the word leveraging a real estate license, because you can leverage a real estate license and not have one by leveraging real estate agents, and I have clients in my career that have came to me and said, hey, you're the one. I don't want to learn how to be a investor at your level. I don't want to learn how to be boots on the ground. I don't necessarily want to learn everything there is to know about your market. That's your job. And I want to hire you to sit in that seat for me being a real estate investor and growing my portfolio. And I think the interesting conversations come when somebody wants to come and get their real estate license. They are no longer a value to us from a standpoint of a client real estate agent relationship. If they get their real estate license, they're just one of us. They're just our competitor at that point. They're just our colleague. And so I always say that to people. You can kind of put yourself in a polarizing position from a standpoint of, hey, I could meet 2, 3, 4 good real estate agents in markets, or even in my own market. I know when I was listening to Bigger Pockets and I got into real estate, they said, hey, go and find a bunch of real estate agents and get them working for you, and whoever brings you a deal wins. It's like us as real estate agents are like, oh my gosh, there's representation. Like you can't just like date everybody at once. But at the same time, man, they're working for commission. They're incentivized to find you properties or help you fulfill your goals. And if you get your license, all that goes out the window to a certain extent. Would you agree with me or disagree? Mike, where's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. What initially jumps to mind is probably a second part podcast that we could do is why as an agent are you guys not buying these properties yourself? Why are you looking out to represent investors like us and not buy them yourself when you're seeing them quote unquote first, right? So that's another big thing that I have an issue with is just realtors they're not being taught properly enough to find these. They're finding the deals, they're getting the deals, but then they're not sourcing them, or they're not taking them down themselves, right? So I would equate it to
creating wealth. Yeah, man.
The one thing that I would equate it to is like if you're in the gym, right, and you're working with the trainer, or you see the trainers at the gym, and there's some trainers that are ripped, but then there's some trainers that are just really, really overweight, right? And it's like, I don't know if I want to work with that trainer that's just completely overweight, has clearly not taken care of themselves. It's kind of like the same thing. I don't know if I want to work with a realtor who sees all these investment deals that's a quote unquote expert in real estate, but never actually buys one themselves. So not to completely play devil's advocate, because there's a lot of amazing realtors, and I know a lot of them that represent a lot of investors and make a lot of money in commissions by representing investors. However, they could make a lot more money if they just changed their outlook, pivoted a little bit, and started buying some of these properties themselves.
Yeah, dude, I completely agree with that. And I see that commonly and I tell that to a lot of people that are looking in other markets. I say, go find a real estate agent that invests and that's doing this actively, because there's partnership opportunities, there's collaboration. Maybe they're buying asset classes that they're not buying what you're interested in. Maybe they're looking for that 5, 6, 7, 8-plex when you're just looking for your first 1 or 2 single family fix and flips, and so there's so much synergy there, but you got to go to the person that's actually doing it. And if my advice for people that are in real estate, people that have their license, why aren't you doing it? Because the minute you do it once, now you're in it. You're doing the game, and you open yourself up to a whole new realm, a new revenue stream, a new lead source, a new column of leads of people that want to invest. And now you're actually one of the few real estate agents that's in the game. So I totally agree with that, Mike.
Agree with you 100%.
We're going to take a little break here. We're going to come back, and I want to really give our audience some nuts and bolts when it comes to pros and cons of actually getting your real estate license. I think a lot of people that have asked questions, hey, what would it take? Maybe I should just get my real estate license. And we want to know, we want to talk about what is actually the good side of this, and even down to some of the fees and things that are obligations. Because I think a lot of people have a part-time mindset with it, which is fine. But I just want you to know the implications of having a license and maybe not making sales or not using it compared to actually leaning into it as a income stream. So, Mike, we're going to touch on that when we get back from the break here, man. Hey, wanted to take a quick break from this week's episode, wondering if you've been asking yourself the question, how do I get started in this stuff? Or what are the next steps? Or where are people that are thinking the same way I am, or that are already doing this stuff? People that are on their passive income journey. Well, we were getting this question a lot, and that's why we were prompted to create a community of like-minded investors and entrepreneurs that we call Passive Income University. This is a place where we have a library of videos of things we've done and ways you can educate yourself on the passive income space. We've brought in experts and had conversations of people that have done this, are currently doing this, and have completed certain parts of this. We have gathered a collection of tools, information, spreadsheets, checklists for you to use in order to continue on your journey in the passive income space. We are going to learn and grow together in order for us to start, take next steps, and complete our passive income journey. If you're curious about taking your next steps, check out our website at p25kg.com, where you can apply to be a part of Passive Income University today. We are back with the Passive 25K podcast, episode 26. We're talking about leveraging your real estate license to create passive income. Mike, you shared some amazing stories about what you're doing in the real estate investor space, some projects you have going on. And we got into what it looks like to actually have your license and do this thing. And why you might want to do that, or why not, or why it's a good idea regardless, depending on your situation. But I really want to touch on this for people that are pretty serious about getting the real estate license. What are the true pros of getting one and the cons? And even in the actual going through the testing and everything that way, all of the I guess I'm trying to give people as much detail behind this of what it takes to get your license, and then understanding, hey, here's the good and the bad of it.
Right. Yeah. Let's riff on this for a little bit too, because whatever you come up with as well and that you think about, but pros, when I think about like the pros, we mentioned it a little bit before, right? It's like access to all the properties on the MLS, access to tools
Yes.
that the average person doesn't just have at their disposal. Um, it completely opens up a network now of other realtors in your market who see you as a licensed professional, maybe haven't done a deal with you, but you say, hey, I work with XYZ brokerage, and they know that brokerage, or right. So you have colleagues now within the industry
Yep.
that gives you an opportunity to network with more. Maybe you make some friends. So I think that you could do that without the real estate license. Don't get me wrong, but having that is kind of like a ticket into the good old boys club, if that makes sense.
It kind of puts you in the game. Yeah, that's a big thing. I think that's a big draw for people. I think it's intimidating for people that are outside of that circle, if you will.
Yeah, 100%. I think the cons that are coming to mind, and we can go back and forth, pros and cons. I mean, it's not free, right? It costs over $1,000, I think, to initially get your license, and it's close to $1,000 every single year with renewals, literally just to send in a check to say renew. And then every 2 years you have to take continuing education. Now that's not necessarily a con, right? Because it's good to stay up with the industry and everything. But I'm just saying, from a guy who, wasn't exactly the number one test taker in his high school or college, that's not one of my favorite things to do. So, every 2 years you have to take continuing education.
I mean, we did some math on this, Mike, too. Like, your coursework is going to be around $1,000, and then you're taking that test, which is like $150 or $200 per time taking it. We've had people take it 4 times, and then usually like fees to be part of the MLS, your local chapter that's sourcing all the listings and being a part of that, and you're being a part of that association. Especially if there's like office fees, if you've got your own office and things, is $250 to $500 a quarter. I mean, so we're not talking about, this is just, these bills will hit you. And if you're not necessarily using your license, they kind of hurt.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you look in your MLS, if I look in mine, I can almost guarantee you that the amount of registered agents in my MLS for the start of 2023 is significantly less than it was for the start of 2022, because the market is wildly different than it was 12 months ago, right? 12 months ago, in the start of 2022, we just came off of 21, which was the best real estate year for a lot of agents ever. And you didn't have to be a good agent. You just had to literally show up, and you would pick up clients at a listing, because there were so many people walking around that they probably lost their realtor inside and they needed somebody to write the offer for them, right? So you literally didn't have to do anything. Now you're in a position where interest rates are high, inventory, the delta hasn't been met yet. And you actually have to work for your clients. You actually have to go out and do some work to find listings. And the people that were part-timers, you mentioned it before the break, like the part-time people, it's a tough gig part-time when things are tough. Yeah. It's an easy gig when it's really, really easy. So,
and I mean, I like to shed light on that, man, because the real estate agency world is a sales world. And if you're a part-timer and you're taking part-time reps in a sales world, it's just the statistics that the top 20% sell 80% of all the houses, because they're the ones in the game. They're the ones going to the gym, if you will. They're the ones that know how to interact with these clients. They're updated on the contracts. They're seeing it every day. They're taking reps every day. Everybody in our office is still a full-time agent, and we just see ourselves having an advantage in our marketplace, because we're constantly keeping up to date on our everything that's going on with updates on our contracts in our market. We're constantly watching the hot sheet. We're constantly training twice a week in our office with everybody, having these conversations on different deal examples. It's hard to compete with our team, and I'm proud of our team for that, because we're all so in it. And that's got to sound intimidating to someone that says, hey, I'm just going to kind of get this part-time and see how I do. Because when it comes to 2 different people, if people are looking for expertise and experience, you're going to compete with those people. And it's kind of a detraction that I'm stating this, but I also want to encourage people that if you're interested in this as a career path and as something that you do want to take seriously, and you do want to be in a sales capacity in order to create income for yourself, earned income, this can be an amazing catalyst to pouring that money into the asset class that you want. Kind of like Mike said it initially, creating capital here to pour it in over here. And we've always had that mindset.
Yeah, totally. I think another potential con would be, this is going to sound bad, so let me explain it, but this fiduciary responsibility as an investor, right? Because as an investor, your goal of every deal is to get it as close to zero as possible for your acquisition cost, and then to sell it for hundreds of millions, right? You want that, you want to create as much profit as possible on each deal. So if I'm coming to Kyle and I say, Kyle has a $500,000 house that he wants $300,000 for, because in his world, he'd be ecstatic. Let's say Kyle lives in Fargo, North Dakota, and this property is in Florida, and he hasn't been to the property. It was a family property, and it's just a pain in his side, and it would give him nothing but joy to get rid of this thing for anything that he can get out of it, right? And he says, I want $300,000 because that's what the tax record says. And we all know that the tax record doesn't necessarily mean the market value of the property, but the tax record says 300,000. And he's like, I want that. Well, great. I'm looking at that deal as an investor that says, man, there's a $200,000 spread on this property. But when I have my license, I have a fiduciary responsibility to Kyle to say, hey, Kyle, oh, by the way, your property is worth $500,000. You should really think about that. Right. And not that I'm trying to take Kyle for a $200,000 ride. And he still may say, hey, I want $300,000. But if somebody saw that and said, well, that was worth 500 and you only paid 300 for it, and they didn't know the full story, they could make a big stink, and you could potentially end up in hot water because they maybe not know that you did exercise your fiduciary responsibility. So with us having our license, it's very easy. We disclose, hey, Kyle, you could get way more money for this property if you just listed it with an agent. You'd actually net more. Yep. We are not the highest and best offer for you. We are the easy button. We're the convenience, but for convenience, you pay a little bit more, right? Or you're going to get less take home just for the ease of the transaction. So again, not that that's a big deal, but it's just another potential red flag area that could trip you up if you weren't a person that fully disclosed everything and were upfront with all your clients.
Yeah. And I think that we've both found ourselves in a place where we haven't necessarily had the one-mindedness that some might have if they just decided to be a real estate investor. And I've thought about that, man. I always wanted to get into real estate agency just because I wanted to be a real estate investor. And I've been challenged on that before, where somebody said, why didn't you just become a real estate investor and stay a real estate investor? And I was like, well, I needed capital. And this was my answer to capital. But man, if you just get to stay in that one lane, to your point, Mike, you don't have to be educated on all of the other X's and O's of fiduciary responsibility and taking care of clients, which I love, by the way, because it's allowed both of us to just to be open books and honestly treat the marketplace with the highest integrity possible. But to your point, man, real estate investors just playing the real estate investor game they're solving the same problem. It's just that they have less hoops, less things to jump through. And I will say, if you're thinking in your head, hey, I could just be a real estate agent and then not really learn that stuff, that's where you can get into a bunch of trouble just by being ignorant. And then I would say that's definitely not the right path if you're not willing to, take that license seriously, because having a real estate license is a professional license in our community with helping people buy and sell assets that are some of the biggest ones in their lives. So it really does have some weight to it.
Yeah, it's the most amount of money that'll trade their hands throughout their lifetime, right?
Yeah.
And I think that your explanation too about being an open book, so that con that I just mentioned that could potentially trip a lot of people up has actually become a pro for guys like you and I who are completely open book when we go to investment properties, because it gives us another tool in our tool belt, right? So if I show up to a property and I say, Kyle, I'm going to give you $300,000 for this $500,000 property. And you say, Mike, that's not really going to get it done for me. I'm going to need $450,000. Well, Kyle, so I have my hat on, right? I have my investor hat on. I just flip that thing around, and now I'm realtor Mike. And I say, well, here's the deal. The only way to get you $450,000 is we're going to take this asset and we're going to list it for $500,000 because that's what I think it could trade for on the market. And after all your fees and closing costs and everything, you're going to net your $450,000 that you need. So now what that does is it turns a 0% opportunity for our investment company that was going to not get us any money. We can pull a 3% commission, half of the 6%, right? We can pull a 3% commission on that listing opportunity, which then creates an opportunity for one of the agents in our office. It creates a little bit of revenue for us as a company to bring in more revenue. To maybe it doesn't pay for our marketing budget, but it helps offset some of the marketing budget. So in that same fashion, it becomes a pro, because it's another tool in our tool belt, which then creates more opportunities for other people in our world, right? So then our agent gets a listing, and off that listing, that agent gets to do an open house and picks up another buyer, which may lead to another deal. So the same thing, by not having it, that could get in the way for some people, by being an open book and being completely transparent with everything we do with all of our clients, it actually creates another opportunity for us by having our license. It's another tool in the tool belt.
Yeah, and that was such a great explanation of how you can get to a place in your business, like Mike just described, where you start to vertically integrate these different things and start hugging the different revenue streams, which is where Mike's at. And you can tell, because it would only take you a couple times sitting in that living room talking to someone that wants to sell, and you give them an offer for $300 and they say that ain't going to do it, and you have no other way to serve them, before it really starts to make sense to say, well, what if I had a real estate investment or a real estate agent partner? Or what if I was a real estate agent and we could serve them here or here? Not to mention, like you talked about being a contractor. Oh, wait, what if we needed to fix up the house in order to sell it here? And there's just, people always want options. And heck, that's what I want. I want options. And I think that that's such an amazing thing as entrepreneurs, that you start to learn. I can give you a buffet line, and now any problem that you have that you want solved, generally I have a solution, and you just pick which one you want. And that's 100%. So good, man.
Another pro that I just thought about as you were talking was the ability to refer clients across the country, right? You can refer. So Kyle has his license, I have my license, and I know I have a best friend from high school who's leaving high school and moving to Fargo to start their job after college, maybe, or buy a house. And I say, hey, I got a guy, right? Everybody needs somebody that's got a guy. And
yes.
So Kyle's my guy there. Well, Kyle can represent them. I trust Kyle. I have a relationship with Kyle. But I don't live in the Fargo MLS. Like, I don't live in that area. I don't know anything, but because I have my license, I can refer a deal to Kyle, and Kyle can pay me 25% referral fee because we're licensed to license. So I can create another revenue stream that goes exactly into what you're saying with vertical integration. So now, essentially, I can service any real estate client all over the country as long as I have my license and I partner with somebody in that market that has their license. So that's another pro.
And people don't know that. I mean, and that's a really cool way to serve people, not only because it's an amazing way to continue to build your business from afar, but also to connect people with people you trust. I've loved referring people, like giving the handhold to someone moving to Minneapolis or someone even moving to Arizona, and knowing that they're going to be working with someone that gives them the same level of service that we're going to give them. And then there's a financial win there. And so that's a huge consideration for people that maybe have a large network and have people moving to different areas of the country, or maybe even consistently. Maybe you're a part of a business where you see this happening. It's like, man, there's really cool thought based on what Mike just said there. That's really good, man. So, I mean, here's the thing, Mike. What's our take on this? If we had to say to get your license or not to get your license, I want us each to kind of give our like answer to people, our final answer based on how you feel. How would you advise someone? And again, you're probably the part here is we don't get to hear who's considering. We don't get to ask them questions. But overall speaking, I want us to give the audience kind of our final 2 cents on actually getting your license or not.
I think if this is going to be an avenue that you go, if real estate investing is going to be a full-time thing for you and you can foresee yourself doing it for the long haul, and you're a person of integrity, authenticity, and transparency, I think that in the long run, your real estate license will help you more than it will hurt you. If you're not somebody who has integrity, authenticity, transparency, you're going to get yourself into a lot of trouble. And those people aren't listening to this podcast anyway. So I think more often than not, it is going to help you. it might not be directly something that's monetarily help, right? Because you're going to have to spend money to get this license, and you might not save that money by listing a property one year. You might be quote unquote out $1,000. But I think what it opens up for you then opportunities is probably going to outweigh not having it. Now, that doesn't mean, I want to be very clear, just because I think that it will help you more than it will hurt you in the long run. This answer could change tomorrow. If somebody came and debated me, I could see a different side of it, whatever. But I also don't want people to take that and say, well, I can't get my real estate license, so I'm not going to invest. Like you don't have to have it.
Yes,
I think it will. I want to be clear. I think it will help you more than it will hurt you, but I don't think it's a prerequisite for you to get into the game.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's huge, man. I really like how you put that. And when I'm thinking about this, it's hard for me to give a prescription. It's a hard question to ask. And so I lean on my experience, and this is what happened to me. I was an engineer out of college. I got a job as an engineer, and I was really frustrated in that role for a lot of different reasons. It just wasn't bringing out the best in me. It wasn't something that gave me energy each day. And so based on a lot of frustration around the role I was in, I needed to make a change. And here's the thing about real estate investing. I knew that I wanted to be a real estate investor, and a lot of people listening to this might be at a job right now that they're saying, I know I want to be a real estate investor, or I am, and I want to scale. But you need to have consistent income in order to pour into investing and building an asset portfolio. And so I needed to decide, should I be an engineer and pour into that as I go? Or could I jump into a different world, a different vocation, being sales, and have a faster path? And for me, my answer was yes to that. And that was based on some personality tests that said, hey, you could probably kick it in the sales gig. You could learn. I joined a team that taught me a lot of stuff about it. So I was able to just shift into a different career in sales in order to create capital that fueled my real estate investor journey. Now, if you have a job that's doing well and you don't mind it, maybe you have great people that you're working with, and you don't necessarily have this pain point, I think you can completely partner with some great real estate agents in your area, some people that are professionals that are doing this, leverage them to help you find deals and build your portfolio, and stay in your world, continuing to create income and start to build those other bridges of passive income as you're staying in your job, not necessarily getting an additional license or changing your vocation. That's my answer.
Agree. I mean, man, right. It's real work, right? It's full-time gig to do this on a daily basis, right? So it's not something that'd be taken lightly. And if you're in a position where you're making a lot of money, but you want to have exposure to the real estate market, find somebody like me, find somebody like Kyle, find somebody that you trust and that's always raising money for some type of project coming up, and take advantage of all the benefits that real estate can offer, but also don't have to partake in any of the dirty work on the front end. You just have to write a check and just receive checks in the mail for the rest of your life. There you go. And we can both agree, man, if you're looking for freedom, I know at a recent event with Front Row Dads, they talked about 3X freedom: financial freedom, time freedom, location freedom. Some of this stuff we're talking, real estate investing, is exactly what we're talking about. This is where you can achieve some of that 3X freedom, that flexibility. Here's the thing though, it's a slow and steady process. This is not the one on the internet or on TikTok right now that's going, hey, learn how to make $500 a month right now and do nothing, the lazy way. You know, like this is something where it's a slow build, but I also think that it's the most proven way to build wealth ever. Mike and I didn't come up with this idea. We just jumped on the train, as many before us have, and mentored us to do. And it's been awesome. It's cool to hear some of the pivots and things that you've got going on in Appleton. Man, Mike, would you agree? I mean, real estate investing has been something in your world that's really it's changed your outlook, changed your stars, right? Yeah, without a doubt, man. I echo every sentiment that you just mentioned. It's been it's the vehicle that we've chosen. There's probably a lot of other vehicles that'll be coming and going along the way, right? But it's definitely a part of the puzzle that'll never go away. So I'm with you 100%.
I love it. Mike, I want to hit you with a couple things just because you're a guy that I see constantly on the grow. Mike has a podcast. Mike is putting out amazing content, by the way, and I want you to give a shout out to that at the end here. But I also am curious, some different things, some different tidbits along your journey that it might help excel you or helped you form big ahas in your world. So I want to ask you a couple quick hitter questions. As far as real estate books go, what's maybe one of the best real estate books you've ever read? And we know that you've read Rich Dad Poor Dad,
Right.
which is, I'm not putting that any lower. It's still number one on my book list all time. But other than that book, what would you say in real estate books?
Brandon Turner's put out some really good books. I know, I think Brandon's in your band, isn't he?
Yeah.
So he's put out some good books. I think his first book I ever read was Real Estate Investing with Low and No Money Down. That was good because I never really realized that was something that you could do. But real estate specific books, man, honestly, Rich Dad Poor Dad is going to be the pinnacle for me no matter what. Yeah. And then from there, it's been following. I would pivot that question to be, instead of my favorite book, my favorite podcast on it, when I first started out, was Bigger Pockets. I think that's like the podcast that everybody I just recommended it today from a guy who called me and wants to start learning a little bit more about real estate. And he's like, well, what can I listen to? I get a lot of windshield time. Bigger Pockets, hands down.
Nice.
Right? So.
And you know what? The thing that I didn't leverage on Bigger Pockets was I didn't use the forums as much as I should.
I know.
What an amazing place. Every question in real estate that's ever been thought of has been asked on those forums.
So let me add one more that might not be a real estate book, but I'm reading it right now, and it's Tax-Free Wealth. It's part of the Rich Dad series by Tim Wheelwright.
Yeah, Wheelwright. Yeah.
That book is fascinating, and it might not be real estate specific. However, we just had a wealth and legacy call in our Front Row Dads community, and Raj Gupta talked about how taxes are the number one thing that we're going to spend money on across our lifetime. And if you can figure out taxes through real estate, so by default, it's a real estate book. If you can figure that out, you're going to be set for the rest of your life.
Man, that's a really good one. And it's, I know when the word tax comes up, it's kind of scary, but seriously, it's part of the Rich Dad series. And I always treat books like that, like go look through the chapters and dive into a random chapter that piques your interest, stuff like that. Or, even I actually like to have the physical copies of books like that too, because listening to them can get a little bit, get caught in the words, right?
Yep.
As far as real estate advice goes, what's maybe some of the best real estate advice you've ever been given?
Agent advice or investor advice?
I'll take either or both. Wherever you feel, whatever's kind of coming up for you.
Man, it's super cliche, and it's not necessarily advice, but it's more experience driven than anything. It took a long time to get into the real estate investing game. And honestly, what it took is one time as an agent, I had a listing and I met with this guy who was doing radon tests. I don't know if you guys do radon tests in your market.
Yeah, we do.
But he was a friend of a friend. He ran the radon company. Everybody knew who he was. And we ended up, I got started with sheriff sales for my fix and flips. So county courthouse steps, going into the courthouse steps, bidding on a property. Anyway, there was one that was coming up, and him and I were both going to look at the property, and we got to the property. We both walked through it, and we're like, okay, well, here are the options. Like, you and I can both go to the courthouse. At this point, I had never bought anything from sheriff sale. And we were just like, why don't we partner on the deal? And as cliche as it sounds, it's just taking action for the first time. Some of the best advice that I could give somebody is just get in the game, get your hands dirty, and start doing something. Because literally, like, taking that first step, that first action, and actually doing something that wasn't just listening to a podcast or reading a book, completely changed. It started a business partnership. It started a friendship with him. We're still best of friends to this day. It launched me into my business partnership that I'm with my business partner now. And it was all literally just from that taking action step. And I know people say that, right? You just got to take action. You just got to take action. But truly, something clicks, something unlocks in your brain when you take that step and actually do something instead of just read about it.
Wow. Dude, well said. I just want everybody to let that hit. because it quite possibly it's hitting me right now. Like, I just love that. And real estate is this amazing, just grace catch-all blanket of time on your side. Because I've done it where I've overbought a property before, but as time clicks on, the market goes up and rents go up. And all of a sudden I go from, hey, I maybe overpaid for that, to, hey, that looks like a really good investment right now, just because action was taken. And Mike, well said, man. That's great advice. And I hope people listen to it, man, because that's exactly, everybody kind of jumps off the cliff with this stuff right away. But if you put some people around you and you're making some strategic decisions, but you're taking action, it can work out. It can work out. And if you don't learn, or if you don't win, you learn. You never really lose at this. And so the last one is just, you maybe touched on a little bit. Well, talk to us about what you're currently working on, Mike. Like, you mentioned some new vision in 2023 around some different asset classes. We touched on it just a hair. I just want to bring that back a little bit on what you're working on in 2023.
Yeah, my new financial life mission is to get to a place and bring others on a journey to bring in $1,000 a day. I think if you can get to it, and it's very similar to your passive 25K group that you have, right?
Yeah.
I think that somebody that can, I think if you can earn $1,000 a day through real estate, get your taxes right? Because a lot of times guys that have real estate don't pay any taxes, and legally, right? Not the IRS isn't coming for them, but that's what's on the future for us is figuring out a way to map out 1K a day, because especially for you and I in the Midwest, we can live a very good life for our families on $1,000 a day. And doing that and teaching others to do that through real estate investing and or other business avenues is kind of what I'm really on fire about right now. And what that looks like is kind of like I said earlier, it's continuing our Blue Badger business, where we go direct to seller and fix and flip and wholesale properties, and then shift that money into what I would call slow money, which would be for us storage units and mobile home parks, and potentially a little bit of commercial like warehouse space or something in the future.
Dude, 1K a day, Mike. I love that, man. I hope people listen to that.
Trademark.
Yes, definitely check out Mike. Mike, give us a quick hit on your podcast and where people can find you.
Yeah, man, that's another thing. I've been having a lot of fun. I got to get you on for sure. Pod Swap. The podcast is Unlock Your Excellence podcast. So we're on all Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and everything. And then we also have a clarity tool that we put together, which is kind of cool. So taking your, if you go to UYEclaritytool.com, you're going to see like a 1-page PDF there. And what I would suggest is that this is kind of the question that comes back to is like, I want to be on this journey of excellence. In our 5 pillars of excellence would be faith, relationships, health, mindset, and money. So that's kind of what we're about in that podcast. And this 1-pager, if you take each one page for each one of the pillars. So for us in this conversation today, it would be like, what do I want my real estate journey to look like? Like, I don't even know where to start. This would be a great place to start, because it's going to lay out what it currently looks like in your life. What's your 1-year goal? Why is that important for you? And then what do you need to be able to do that? And then take that information and then put it into action like we talked about before. So that's what we're working on right now. Cool,
man. I love that. And definitely check out the podcast, Mike. I've been watching, I've been seeing some of the people you've had on, some of the content you're covering. Just great stuff, dude. Keep it up. And thanks so much for coming on the podcast, man. Enjoyed having this conversation with you.
I appreciate you, man. Look forward to seeing you in Utah.
You as well. This has been another episode of the Passive 25K podcast with Kyle Reedstrom. If you liked what you heard today, I encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video so we can get more of these conversations out to people that are curious about starting their passive income journey. And if you are thinking about starting your passive income journey, the next steps are to go to our website at p25kg.com and hit apply. This will get you into our application to join our community called Passive Income University, where you can learn everything there is to know about starting and completing your passive income journey. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll catch you next time for another conversation on the Passive 25K podcast.